You know this feeling already. You have prayed the same prayer more times than you can count. You have done everything you knew how to do, and still, nothing moves. The healing does not come. The door stays shut. The answer never arrives. You are sitting in a waiting room where the clock on the wall has stopped, meaning anything. You are staring at a little circle, spinning on a screen that will not load. You are on a road that shows no sign of ending. That is what the word wait does to us. It empties a stretch of time and leaves us standing inside it, doing nothing, just hoping it ends soon. So when we open the Bible and read a line like "Wait on the Lord," we drag all of that in with us. We picture folded hands and a blank stare aimed at heaven. Sit still, be patient, and try not to complain while God slowly gets around to you. But here is the strange part. The Hebrew word hiding underneath that English line describes almost the opposite of what we just pictured. It is not the word for killing time. It is closer to a rope pulled tight, a runner leaning into the blocks, a watchman on a wall, wide awake, straining toward a morning he already knows is coming. The English word fooled us. And the moment you see what the original actually carries, one of the most quoted promises in all of Scripture stops being a verse about patience and becomes a verse about strength. Especially the kind of strength you need the most on the day your own finally runs out. Because this promise was never written for people who have it all together. It was written for the exhausted, for the ones still standing only because they have not yet found the strength to stop. Today, we are going to uncover what wait on the Lord really means, and why it quietly changes everything the moment you reach the end of yourself. So let us start where almost everyone starts, with the line itself. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. That is Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 31. You have seen this one before. It has been printed on coffee mugs and bracelets and greeting cards. It hangs on the walls of hospital rooms. People who could not name a single other line from the book of Isaiah can usually get most of this one out from memory. And here is the quiet problem. Almost all of us read it backwards. We hear the word wait, and we assume the hard part is the standing still. So we picture the whole thing like a transaction. God hands out the eagle wings, and the running, and the soaring as a reward, a prize you earn by being patient enough, for long enough. Endure the boredom, pass the test, keep your mouth shut and your hopes low, and then, once you have proven you can sit there without falling apart, the good stuff finally arrives. But that is not the shape of this promise at all. Read it again, slowly. The waiting is not the price you pay before the strength shows up. The waiting is the very thing that produces the strength. The soaring does not come after the waiting is over. It grows straight up out of the waiting itself. That is a small shift on paper. But sit with it for a moment, because it changes everything about the season you might be standing in right now. If the strength is a reward for waiting well, then a long, hard, silent stretch can only mean one thing. You are failing the test. God is holding back. You have not been patient enough yet. But if the strength grows out of the waiting, then that same long, hard, silent stretch means something almost unthinkable. It means the waiting is not God ignoring you. It is God doing the exact work in you that nothing else could do. The season you keep begging him to end may be the very season he is using the most. Same verse, same words on the page. Two completely different worlds to live inside. And the reason we get it backwards is not really our fault. It is buried in the language, because the word our English Bibles translate as wait is carrying something the English could never quite hold. To see it, we have to look at the one word the translators flattened. And once you see what it actually meant to the people who first wrote it down, this verse never reads the same way again. So here is the one word that everything turns on. In Hebrew, the word we translate as wait in this verse is kavah, and it is a far wider word than our English one. It shows up around 49 times across the Hebrew Bible, from the opening chapter of Genesis all the way through to the prophets. Translators render it as wait, but also as hope, and look, and expect, depending on where it lands. Already you can feel it stretching past our single flat English word. In English, hoping and waiting are two different activities. One leans forward, one just sits there. But in Hebrew, they live inside the same root. Because to these writers, you do not truly wait for something unless you are also leaning toward it in hope, and the root goes somewhere our word never does. The oldest lexicons, the great reference books where scholars have spent whole careers tracing every word in the Old Testament, connect kavar back to a physical picture, to twist, to stretch, to pull a thing tight. There is a clue to this sitting in the very first chapter of the Bible, in Genesis, when God says, "Let the waters be gathered together into one place." The word for gathered comes from this same root. The waters are pulled together, drawn into one, collected under tension toward a single point. That is the raw, physical sense underneath the word, long before anyone ever used it for prayer. So picture how a rope actually gets made. You take thin, weak strands, the kind that snap under almost nothing, and you twist them together. And you keep twisting, and the tension itself is what turns them into something strong. One thread alone breaks in your hands. The same threads, wound tight, can hold the weight of a grown man over the side of a wall. That is the image hiding inside the word wait. Now, I want to be careful right here, because this is exactly the kind of place where people love to overreach. Hebrew is a real language with real limits. It is not a secret code where every word hides a sermon. The scholars who trace kavar back to this root mark it as probable, not certain, so we will hold it the way they do, as a strong likelihood and a vivid picture, never as some magic decoder ring for hidden meanings. But it lines up beautifully with the way the word actually behaves everywhere else in the text. Kavar is taut. It leans forward. It is the posture of someone straining toward what is coming, not someone slumped in a chair hoping it ends soon. So set the two pictures side by side. The English wait is a person in a waiting room, flipping through a magazine they are not really reading, glancing up at the door every few minutes. The Hebrew kavar is a person at the end of a rope, every fiber of it wound tight, holding real weight, their whole body leaning hard in one direction. Same word on the page, two completely different postures of the soul, and that changes the promise before we even reach the eagles. Because waiting on God, it turns out, is not the empty space where nothing happens. It is active, it is expectant, it is leaned all the way forward, which means a long season of waiting stops looking like God forgetting your name. It starts looking like an invitation into the one posture where His strength can finally become available to you. But there is a second word in this verse doing just as much quiet work, and we almost always skip right over it, because we were so busy arguing about the word wait that we never stopped to ask what it really means to have your strength renewed. Look at the verses sitting right before the famous one. Isaiah says, "Even the young grow tired. Even strong men, men in their absolute prime, stumble and fall flat on the ground." The whole passage is building toward one picture, human strength at its very best, hitting its ceiling and collapsing. And then comes the turn. "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Renew. In English, that sounds like a refill, like topping off a tank that ran low. You had strength, it drained away, and God simply pours more of the same back in. Same you, just recharged. But that is not what the Hebrew word says. The word is kalaf, and it does not mean refill. It means to change, to exchange, to swap one thing out for another entirely. It is the word you would reach for to describe taking off worn-out clothes and putting on new ones, not patching the old coat, replacing it. Sit with what that does to the promise. The verse is not describing a topped-off version of the strength you already have. It is describing God taking your strength, the spent, exhausted, finished version of it, and trading it for His own. You hand over the thing that has run out. He hands back something that never will. A refill and an exchange are two completely different transactions. One leaves you leaning on a slightly improved version of yourself. The other leaves you leaning entirely on him. And notice what kind of strength we are even talking about. The Hebrew word here is not just muscle. It reaches wider than that. It means the whole capacity of a person. Physical, yes, but also the inner strength to keep doing the right thing under pressure. The strength to hold your character together when everything around you is pressing against it. So, this is not a promise of an energy drink for the body. It is a renovation of the whole person. Every worn-out layer of you, exchanged for something new. And this is exactly where the waiting and the strength finally connect. Remember the young men who stumble and fall. The whole point is that human strength runs out. Every version of it, eventually. And the turn in verse 31 is not, so try harder. The turn is, wait, lean in, hold the line, stay pulled toward him. And in that posture, the exchange quietly happens. Your weakness gets traded for his power. So the eagle wings are not a prize you finally earned. They are simply what is left after the swap. You came in with empty hands. You walk out wearing a strength that was never yours to begin with. And here is the part that should take the pressure off. If the strength is his and not yours, then you do not have to manufacture it. You do not have to squeeze one more drop out of a tank that is already dry. You only have to keep leaning toward the one who actually has it. The emptying is not the disaster. The emptying is the very thing that makes room for the exchange. Quick pause before we go on. If this way of reading the Bible, going back to what the words actually meant to the people who first wrote them, is something you want more of, the simplest way to help is to subscribe and drop a comment below. It takes about 2 seconds. And it genuinely helps these studies reach more tired people. Now, let us get right back to it. It helps to know who first heard these words, because they were not spoken to people having a slightly hard week. Listen to the complaint God gently repeats back to them. Why do you say, O Jacob, and why do you complain, O Israel, that my way is hidden from the Lord, and my cause is disregarded by my God? That is the sound of a people at the very end of everything. This part of Isaiah speaks into the Babylonian exile, and to feel the weight of it, you have to picture what that actually meant. Their city had fallen, the walls were broken, the temple, the one place on earth where they believed the presence of God had rested among them, was a pile of blackened rubble. They had been marched off in chains to a foreign land, hundreds of miles from home. And now the years were passing. A whole generation was growing old in Babylon, raising children who had never seen Jerusalem, and starting to wonder if they ever would. And the question moving through every tent, whispered in the dark, was not really a political one. It was the deepest kind of question a human heart can ask. Has God forgotten us? Did he lose? Is he even paying attention anymore? That is the exhaustion underneath this chapter. Not a bad mood, not a rough afternoon. The bone-deep weariness of people who have waited so long that they have started to doubt the waiting is worth anything at all. And here is what you have to see. This is the exact condition the promise was written for. God does not walk up to comfortable, rested people and say, "Wait on me and renew your strength." He says it to the ones who are flat on the ground, to the exiles, to the ones who cannot get back up on their own, which means, if this promise held for them in that, then it can hold for you. So let me stop describing them and describe you for a moment. Maybe you are standing in a long wait of your own right now, the recovery that is dragging on so much longer than anyone promised it would. The prayer you have prayed so many times, the words have gone smooth and worn in your mouth, and still no answer comes. The season with no clarity at all, where you cannot see the next step, and God has gone quiet in a way that genuinely scares you. And somewhere in there, the same old question starts to rise. Has he forgotten me? Did I do something wrong? Is anyone even listening? If that is you, hear this carefully. That feeling is not proof that your faith is failing. It is the exact place this verse was written to meet. You are not standing outside the promise, looking in. You are standing in the precise spot where it was always meant to land. But to really understand what God was asking of those exiles, and what he may be asking of you, we need one more picture. And it is the most demanding, most wide-awake picture of waiting in the entire Bible. There is a psalm that hands us that picture with almost unbearable clarity. My soul waits for the Lord, the writer says. More than watchmen wait for the morning. More than watchmen wait for the morning. He says it twice, because he wants you to feel it. So hold that image, because it quietly takes apart everything we assumed about waiting. A watchman on a city wall in the ancient world was not relaxing. He was the single most awake person in the entire city. Everyone else slept safely behind him. He stood through the cold hours, scanning the dark, listening for the scrape of a sandal that should not be there, watching the eastern sky for the first grey crack of dawn. His waiting was total alertness. His whole body leaned into the night, straining toward a morning he was completely certain would come. That is the picture the psalmist reaches for, to describe his own soul. Not a man dozing until God finally shows up. A man on the wall, eyes open, every sense awake, leaned toward a dawn he has staked his life on. And there is another psalm that says it even more plainly. Wait for the Lord. Be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Watch where the command to be strong sits. It is wrapped on both sides by the command to wait. Wait. Be strong. Wait. If waiting meant going limp and doing nothing, you could never bookend it with, be strong and take courage. Nobody needs courage to do nothing. You need courage to hold a posture under pressure, when everything in you is screaming to bolt and fix it yourself. That is what Koehler asks of you. And now watch what the promise does with the bird. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. We picture a bird beating its wings furiously, fighting its way up into the sky. But that is not how a great bird of prey actually climbs. It does not flap harder and harder. It spreads its wings, holds them open, and waits for the rising column of warm air to lift it. The bird does not manufacture the lift. It positions itself to receive it. It opens its wings to a current it cannot see or create, and trusts that current to carry it higher than its own strength ever could. Do you see it now? That is the whole promise in a single image. You do the leaning. You hold the posture. You spread the wings. But the lift, the strength, the height, none of it comes from you. It comes from the exchange. It comes from the God you are leaned toward. And here is the detail that should change how you think about your hardest nights. The watchman waits hardest in the last hour before dawn. That is when the night is darkest, when his legs ache most, and the morning feels furthest away. That is the hour his mind starts playing tricks, when the sunrise begins to feel less like a promise and more like a rumor. He does not stop watching then. That last dark hour is the very hour he was put on the wall for. So when your waiting gets harder, right before the answer, and it so often does, do not read it as a sign that you are failing. Read it the way a watchman reads the deepest dark, as the sign that the morning is close. And notice, the watchman does not invent the sunrise to keep himself going. The morning is real. It has come every single day before this one, without fail, whether he believed in it or not. His confidence is not wishful thinking. It rests on the plain track record of the sun. That is the difference between simply hoping things turn out and the kind of waiting this verse describes. One crosses its fingers, the other leans its whole weight on someone with a perfect record of showing up. So the only real question left is a practical one. What does this kind of waiting actually look like on an ordinary day when nothing has changed yet? Centuries after Isaiah, a man named Paul was carrying a burden he begged God 3 times to take away. And the answer he got back was not the rescue he asked for. It was this: my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. There it is again, The same pattern. Strength showing up not after the weakness is gone, but right inside it. So this is not just one old Hebrew idea. It runs straight through the whole Bible. But let us get practical, because this is the question that matters most. If waiting is active, if it is leaning and straining and holding a posture, then what do you actually do on an ordinary day when nothing has changed? Waiting on the Lord is not one single thing. It is at least three. The first is a kind of active stillness, not the absence of activity, but the deliberate turning of your attention back toward God, on purpose, even on the days you feel absolutely nothing. This is the rope maker still twisting, long before the rope looks any stronger. It is showing up to pray, when prayer feels like talking to the ceiling. The feeling is not the point. The leaning is the point. The second is remembering who He is. Because here is what exhaustion quietly does to us. It shrinks God and swells the problem, until the crisis fills the whole sky, and He becomes a rumor at the edge of it. Waiting well means deliberately reversing that, going back to what He has already done, in the scriptures and in your own history, and letting Him grow large again while the problem shrinks back to its actual size. The watchman survives the night by remembering the sun has a record. And the third one might surprise you. Waiting well includes honest lament. Look back at the exiles. God did not scold them for crying out that His way seemed hidden. That complaint is right there in the text, preserved, not deleted. Telling God the truth about your pain is not the opposite of faith. It is one of its purest forms. You do not pour out your heart to someone you have given up on. The lament itself is a kind of leaning. Jesus once told a story that pulls all of this together. 10 young women were waiting for a bridegroom to arrive for a wedding. All 10 waited. All 10 grew tired. All 10 fell asleep. The difference was not who managed to stay the most awake. The difference was that 5 of them had prepared, had brought extra oil for their lamps, and 5 had not. When the call finally came in the middle of the night, the ready ones walked straight into the celebration. The others were still scrambling to find what they needed. That is active waiting in a single picture, not sitting there hoping the bridegroom hurries up, but keeping your lamp full, staying ready, tending the small daily things, so that whenever the morning breaks, you are not caught empty. And if some quiet voice is whispering that maybe the morning will not come for you, that maybe you are the one exception, hear this. The bridegroom in the story is late, but he comes. The morning in the psalm feels far away, but it breaks. What feels uncertain to you tonight has never once been uncertain to Him. Your waiting is not a gamble on whether God will show up. It is a lamp kept burning for a God who always has. So picture it one more time, and let it settle all the way down into you. So picture yourself on that wall. It is the last and darkest hour of the night. Your legs ache. The cold has worked its way into your bones. Your eyes burn from staring into the black, and still you lean toward the east, watching, because you have staked everything on a morning you cannot yet see. And then it happens. A thin line of grey along the horizon, then a wash of pale gold, and the darkness you were sure would never end quietly begins to lift. That is what waiting on the Lord actually is. Not the passive thing we assumed. Not crossing your fingers and hoping it all works out somehow. It is the hardest, most awake, most courageous work a tired soul can do. It is the exhausted, still leaning. And if that is the truest picture of waiting, then the waiting you are doing right now is not wasted time. It is the wall. It is your post. So think about where you actually are tonight, the diagnosis you are still waiting on, the prayer you have prayed until the words wore smooth, the season that has gone so quiet, you began to wonder if anyone was there at all. Hear the promise again, in its real shape. You bring the emptiness, He brings the strength, you hand over the worn-out garment, He clothes you in His own, which means the moment you dread the most, the moment your own strength finally gives out completely, is not the end of the story. It is the exact place the exchange was always waiting to happen. You do not have to arrive strong. You only have to keep leaning, with your lamp still lit, toward the one who is. And I will be honest with you, the way this passage is honest. The morning may not break exactly when you want it to, or look exactly like you pictured it. Some of those exiles grew old and died still waiting. But their hope was never pinned to a timeline. It was pinned to the character of a God who had never once failed to keep his word. So remember the rope, pulled tight and made strong under tension. Remember the worn coat, traded for a brand new one. Remember the eagle, spreading its wings to a current it did not create. Remember the watchman and the morning that always, always comes. The next time you read "Wait on the Lord," do not picture a waiting room. Picture the wall. Picture the watchman leaning toward the dawn. If this opened up that verse for you in a new way, do something small before you go. Give this video a like, so it reaches one more tired person who needs it tonight. Leave a comment, even a single word, and tell me the season you are waiting through, so we can carry it together. And subscribe, so the next word we dig into finds its way to you. And now, hear this over you. May the God of all hope meet you right in the middle of your waiting. May his grace prove sufficient on the day your own strength runs out. And may you rise, on wings you never had to earn, to run and not grow weary, to walk and not faint. Keep watching for the morning. It is coming. God bless you.